Mason was the first to notice that I had stopped asking what he thought. A message arrived from my company one Monday morning. The Boston office was opening a new management position, and they wanted to know whether I would consider relocating. I completed the application, attached my resume, and pressed send before it even occurred to me that I had not mentioned it to him. When my cousin Emma's wedding invitation arrived, addressed to Claire Donovan and guest, I checked the box for one person and mailed it back the same day. Even the procedure I had been putting off for months, the one that required an overnight hospital stay, I arranged alone. I found a specialist, called the insurance company, scheduled the tests, and booked the surgery without asking Mason for help, which was almost funny considering Mason was a doctor. When he eventually found the paperwork on the kitchen counter, he frowned. "You need surgery? Why didn't you tell me?" The answer came out before I could soften it. "I handled it. Don't worry." We both went silent. Only a few weeks earlier, I had been the girlfriend who sent him pictures of two dresses and asked which one looked better. I used to call from restaurants because I could not decide what to order. I once texted him 3 different photos of paint samples for the hallway. At first, he always answered. Then his replies became shorter. "Either is fine. Pick what you like." Eventually, he stopped replying at all. I told myself he was busy. His shifts were long, his patients were demanding, and his phone never seemed to stop ringing. Then I realized he was never too busy for Nora Hale. Nora was the daughter of the professor who had mentored Mason during medical school. After her father died, Mason's family asked him to keep an eye on her while she finished her residency. The morning before my surgery, the nurse handed me a clipboard. "Dr. Cross is still in Denver for the conference," she said. "If you would rather wait until he returns, we can move the procedure." "No," I replied. "Tomorrow is fine." She nodded and pointed to the last page. As I stepped into the hospital corridor, I heard the wheels of a suitcase scraping across the floor. Mason was walking toward me in a dark coat, looking as though he had come straight from the airport. Nora followed beside him, wearing a pale gray scarf I recognized immediately. I had bought it for Mason during our anniversary trip to Montreal. His eyes narrowed when he saw me. "What are you doing here?" I lifted the folder slightly. "My pre-op appointment." "You're still going through with that?" "Still." The word landed harder than it should have. He took the papers from my hand and scanned them quickly. "I'm on call tomorrow. This isn't urgent. We can reschedule for a day when I'm free." I reached out and took the folder back. "There's no need. I already handled everything." For a second, he simply stared at me. That silence told me enough. As I pulled the folder toward me, my elbow struck a small paper bag tucked beneath Mason's arm. It fell open on the polished floor, and a white prescription box slid across the tiles. I bent down before he could stop me. The label was for hormonal medication. Mason picked it up quickly. "It's not what you're thinking." I didn't say anything. "It's Nora's. Her doctor prescribed it for severe migraines and irregular cycles. I collected it because the pharmacy was closing before her shift ended." His explanation was calm and practiced. Nora pulled Mason's scarf tighter around her neck. "Claire, I'm really sorry," she whispered. "I know how this looks. I've just been having a terrible month. The panic attacks came back, and sometimes I can't even stay alone in my apartment. Mason is the only person who can calm me down when it gets bad. Last night, I thought I might do something reckless. He stayed on the phone with me until I fell asleep." I had heard that speech before. Whenever Mason left our bed at 2 in the morning, Nora was in crisis. Whenever he canceled dinner, she had stopped answering her phone. She was always not stable enough to be left alone, and Mason always looked at me as if jealousy had turned me cruel. A month earlier, I woke with a sharp pain beneath my ribs and asked which specialist to call. He had barely looked away from his laptop. "Search it online, Claire. You're capable of making an appointment." When I said I was scared, he sighed. "You depend on me for every small problem. You need to become more independent." Yet, he carried Nora's suitcase, collected her medication, and flew beside her because she hated traveling alone. I looked at the prescription box, then at the scarf around her neck. "You should probably stay close to her then," I said. "Her problems are clearly more serious than my surgery." Nora's cheeks turned pink. "That isn't what I meant. Are you still upset about the conference?" Mason's expression hardened. "Claire, this is getting ridiculous. I already explained why I didn't tell you about Denver. The conference had begun on his birthday. I traded shifts to get the day free, cooked dinner, ordered his favorite cake, and wrapped the vintage pen he had wanted for months. I waited until nearly midnight. He never came home. I learned he was in Denver from Nora's rooftop photo. Mason sat across from her, smiling in a way I had not seen in months. When I called, he sounded irritated. It was a last-minute professional opportunity I didn't have time to explain. You had time to get on a plane. Why do you need a report of everything I do? Birthdays happen every year. Am I always the easiest person to disappoint?" After 1 second, he said, "You're being emotional. We'll talk when I'm back in Portland." And he ended the call. Now, standing in the hospital corridor, I felt no urge to argue. "No," I told Nora. "I'm not upset anymore." That answer seemed to disturb Mason more than anger would have. 2 days earlier, I had signed the relocation agreement. The human resources manager watched me initial each page, then leaned back in her chair. "This position is in Boston, Claire. It's not temporary. Are you sure you don't want to discuss it with your partner first?" "No," I said. "I'm sure." The last time I considered changing jobs, I had printed 2 offers and placed them beside Mason's dinner plate. He glanced at them for less than a minute. "It's your career. Don't make me choose for you." That same weekend, he spent nearly 10 hours helping Nora prepare an application for a research program at his hospital. He corrected every paragraph, called 2 department heads, and arranged a meeting with the program director. Mason said I relied on him too much. When I told him about my workday, he put in his earbuds and listened to medical lectures. When I needed a ride to the airport, he said reorganizing his morning would be inconvenient. When I asked to join a dinner with his colleagues, he told me it would be healthier if I built my own social life. For years, I believed he was simply distant. Then Nora appeared, and I discovered that distance was a choice. She could call him at 3 in the morning, and he would leave without hesitation. She could forget lunch, and he would bring food to the hospital. She could panic before a presentation, and he would rehearse it with her until midnight. Whenever I questioned any of it, his answer was always the same. "She's vulnerable, Claire. She could hurt herself." Then he would stop speaking, allowing the silence to make me feel guilty. But Nora's emergencies were strangely well-timed. They happened before our anniversary dinner, during my promotion celebration, or on the rare evenings when Mason and I had planned something together. Standing in the hospital corridor, I finally understood that the explanation no longer mattered. After tomorrow's surgery, I had 11 days left in Portland. Then Mason Cross would become someone I used to know. My best friend, Ava, called that evening. "I took tomorrow off," she announced. "Your personal nurse will arrive at 8 with snacks, clean clothes, and several terrible celebrity magazines." I laughed as I unlocked the apartment. "The guest room is ready. I changed the sheets and—" I stopped. The new sheets were crumpled on the floor. A huge stuffed rabbit occupied half the bed. The dresser was covered with cosmetics, medicine bottles, and hair products. A cream-colored robe hung over the chair. It belonged to me. I had bought it for my birthday and never worn it. Now there was a dark wine stain across one sleeve. The front door opened behind me. Nora's laughter entered first. "Thank you for dinner, Mason. That restaurant was exactly what I needed." Mason stepped inside carrying 2 takeout bags. When he saw me, he stopped. "Nora had an argument with her roommate. She can't go back there tonight." I looked around the room. This doesn't look like one night. "She'll stay until she finds somewhere safe. Ava is staying here after my surgery. I told you last week." His expression changed slightly. He had forgotten. "I'm sorry," he said. "We'll figure something out." Then he lifted one of the bags. "We went to Bellini's. I brought you pasta."
Bellini's was the restaurant I had asked him to visit with me for nearly 6 months. He had always been too busy. I took the bag from his hand, walked into the kitchen, and dropped it into the trash.
Mason's jaw tightened. You didn't have to do that. Nora stepped forward, her eyes already shining. Claire, please don't blame him. This is my fault. I've barely slept in 3 nights. Every time I close my eyes, I wake up shaking. She glanced toward the guest room. If Ava needs the bed, I can sleep on the couch. I don't want to cause trouble. You already moved half your apartment into my home, I said. I think the trouble arrived before you did. Her expression crumpled. Mason placed the remaining takeout bag on the counter. That's enough. I walked into the guest room and picked up the ruined robe. Did you ask before wearing this? Nora looked down. I thought it belonged to Mason's sister. Mason doesn't have a sister. It was an accident. I gathered the stuffed rabbit, the cosmetics, the medicine bottles, and the clothes scattered across the floor. I carried everything into the hallway and set it beside the front door. Nora stared at me. What are you doing? Clearing the room? You can't just throw out my things. I'm not throwing them out. I'm returning them to the person who brought them here without asking. Her tears vanished almost instantly. Her voice became sharp. If you didn't want me here, you could have said so. You don't have to humiliate me. I did say Ava was staying here. That isn't the same thing. No, I agreed. Ava was invited. Nora's face turned red. She grabbed her handbag, pushed past me, and ran out of the apartment. Mason watched the door close, then turned toward me with disbelief. She recently changed medication. Do you understand what you might have triggered? I folded the stained robe over my arm. Her reaction is not my responsibility. She's in a fragile state, and I'm having surgery tomorrow. This is different. Of course it is. He dragged one hand over his face. If you didn't want her staying here, you could have told me calmly. I would have booked a hotel. This is our apartment. You should have asked before inviting someone to live here. She wasn't moving in. It was temporary. You gave her my belongings and forgot my friend was coming. I said I was sorry. You said we would figure something out, as though Ava was the inconvenience. Mason's eyes hardened. You invited Ava without asking me. I almost laughed. Ava was coming for one night to help me after a medical procedure. Nora had filled drawers, covered the bathroom counter with her things, and apparently planned to remain indefinitely. But there was no point explaining the difference to a man determined not to see one. You're right, I said. He blinked. What? You're right. Apparently, temporary arrangements don't require a conversation. That isn't what I meant. It's exactly what you said. I carried Nora's belongings downstairs and left them beside the building's reception desk. When I returned, Mason was putting on his coat. I'm going to find her. Okay? He paused, waiting for something else. A protest, a warning, an accusation. I gave him none. Claire, we'll talk about this later. Sure. The door closed behind him. I returned to the guest room, replaced the sheets, set a clean towel on the bed, and placed a glass of water on the nightstand for Ava. Then I sat alone on the edge of my bed and opened a new list on my phone. Cancel the utilities, change the mailing address, pack the books, return the spare key. The Boston transfer had already been approved. My new apartment lease had been signed 3 days earlier. For the first time, leaving did not feel like losing him. It felt like finally choosing myself. Mason did not return until long after midnight. I heard the lock turn, the quiet scrape of his shoes, and the bedroom door opening. He stood beside the bed for several seconds, perhaps waiting for me to ask whether he had found Nora. I kept my eyes closed. Eventually, he lay down without speaking. At 8 the next morning, Ava arrived carrying 2 bags, a box of pastries, and enough coffee for an entire hospital floor. The moment I opened the door, she studied my face. What happened? Nothing I can't handle. She looked past me at the spotless guest room, then toward the closed bedroom door. That sentence sounds suspicious. I took one of the coffee cups from her. Mason invited Nora to stay here. She used my robe, ruined it, and moved her things into your room. Ava became very still. Where is she now? Not here. Good. She set the pastries on the counter and hugged me before I could pretend I did not need it. For once, I did not calculate whether I was asking for too much. Mason appeared 10 minutes later, already dressed for work. His gaze moved from Ava to the overnight bag beside the guest room. You're staying here? Ava smiled politely. Claire needs someone with her after the anesthesia. I know that.
Excellent. Then we all understand the plan. He ignored the edge in her voice and looked at me. My schedule changed. I'll try to get to the hospital before the procedure ends. You don't need to. I said I'll try. And I said you don't need to. Something passed across his face, irritation mixed with uncertainty. Before, I would have begged him to come. I would have reminded him of the time, sent him the room number, and checked my phone every few minutes. Now I picked up my coat. Ava, are you ready? She took the car keys from her bag. Completely. The surgery lasted a little over 2 hours. When I woke, the room felt distant and soft around the edges. Ava was sitting beside the bed with one of her ridiculous magazines open across her knees. You survived, she said. Barely. That hospital gown nearly killed me. She laughed and handed me water. For the next hour, she adjusted my pillow, argued with the vending machine, and watched half of a terrible reality show with me. At 4:20, Mason appeared in the doorway. His coat was still buttoned, and his hair looked slightly disordered, as if he had rushed through the hallway. His eyes moved across the room. The empty coffee cups, Ava's bag, the fresh water beside my bed, the extra blanket tucked around my legs. How are you feeling? Tired. He stepped closer. I'm sorry I'm late. Nora had another episode after what happened last night. Ava slowly lowered her magazine. Mason seemed to realize how the sentence sounded, but it was too late to pull it back. The procedure went well, I said. Ava spoke with the doctor. I should have been here. It's handled. Don't worry. He froze. The words hung between us, familiar and suddenly sharp. He sat in the chair beside my bed and began asking questions about the operation, the medication, and the recovery schedule. They were safe questions, clinical questions, questions with correct answers. After 15 minutes, his phone vibrated. He checked the screen. I need to go. Of course, Ava said. He looked at her, then back at me. Text me when you get home. I almost asked which home he meant, the apartment we shared now or the one in Boston I would move into in 10 days. Instead, I nodded. Sure.
When he left, Ava waited until his footsteps disappeared down the corridor. Then she closed her magazine. When are you telling him? I'm not. Her eyebrows rose. About Boston? About any of it. She studied my face for a moment. Then she reached across the bed and squeezed my hand. When do we start packing? Tomorrow. Good, she said. I'll bring boxes. For the first time all day, I smiled without forcing. The next 9 days passed with an unfamiliar calm. Not happiness, exactly. More like the silence that follows a decision once there is nothing left to debate. Ava helped me pack while Mason was at work. We started with the things he would not notice. Winter clothes, old photographs, books from the lower shelves, and the kitchen appliances I had bought before we moved in together. Each evening, I carried 1 or 2 boxes to Ava's car. Mason noticed that something had changed, but he could not identify it. I stopped sending messages about small things. I did not tell him when my follow-up appointment went well or when the Boston office confirmed my starting date. I stopped reminding him to buy coffee and stopped saving dinner for him when he worked late. When he came home, I said hello. Then I returned to whatever I was doing. One evening, we sat across from each other eating takeout. Nora called twice. Mason took the first call on the balcony. During the second, he walked into the hallway and closed the door behind him. When he returned, he watched me carefully. She's having a difficult week, he said. I continued eating. Okay? She's still upset about the apartment. I'm sure she is. He waited. In the past, I would have asked where she was staying, why he was responsible for her, or whether he understood how inappropriate all of it looked. This time, I reached for my water. The absence of an argument unsettled him more than anger ever had. Are you not going to say anything? What would you like me to say? I don't know. Then neither do I. He stared at me for several seconds before looking down at his food. On the 7th night, I was kneeling beside a box in the bedroom when he entered. What are you doing? Sorting books. He glanced at the half-empty shelf. You're getting rid of all of those? Some of them. He sat on the edge of the bed. You've been strange lately. I placed another novel into the box. Have I? You don't talk to me anymore. I almost smiled at the irony. I talk when there's something necessary to discuss.
That's not what I mean. You used to tell me random things. Problems at work, something funny you saw, a movie you wanted to watch. You usually put your headphones on. His face tightened. I was tired. I know. You're saying that like it's an accusation. It isn't, and it truly was not. Accusations require hope. They are what people make when they still believe the other person might understand and change. I had passed that point quietly. Mason leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Is this about Nora? No. Then what is it? I closed the box and pressed the tape across the top. I'm tired. That doesn't explain anything. It explains enough. He watched me write books across the cardboard. Where are those going? To Ava's? Why? She has more storage space. It was not entirely a lie. He stood and crossed the room. Claire, something is happening. I can feel it. For one brief moment, I considered telling him. Boston? The apartment? The transfer? The plane ticket waiting in my email?
Then I remembered every time I had tried to speak and watched him decide I was too emotional, too dependent, or too demanding. You told me to become more independent, I said. His expression shifted. I didn't mean you should shut me out. I'm not shutting you out. I'm handling my own life. That isn't the same thing. It felt the same when you asked me to do it. He opened his mouth, but his phone began ringing. Nora's name appeared on the screen. We both looked at it. He hesitated for only a second before answering. Nora? What happened? I lifted the box and carried it from the room. Behind me, Mason's voice softened into the patient, gentle tone I had once believed he simply did not possess. That night, I booked my final car to the airport. On the morning of my departure, I woke before sunrise. Mason was still asleep, one arm resting across the empty space between us. For a few seconds, I watched him breathe and tried to remember the last time that sight had made me feel safe. Nothing came. I moved quietly through the apartment. The final box contained the things I had left until last: my mother's chipped blue mug, a candle from a trip to Vancouver, a notebook full of unfinished plans, and the framed photograph of Ava and me from college. There was surprisingly little left. 4 years of my life fit into 7 boxes and 1 suitcase. At 7:30, the car service sent a message saying the driver was waiting downstairs. I stood in the kitchen with my coat on, staring at the blank sheet of paper I had placed on the counter. I had imagined writing a long letter. I could have explained every canceled dinner, every ignored message, every night I lay awake waiting for him to come home from one of Nora's emergencies. I could have described how it felt to discover that the man who called me demanding was capable of endless patience, just not with me. But Mason already knew what had happened. He had simply never believed it would have consequences. So I wrote one sentence. I handled it. Don't worry. Then I left the spare key beside the note and closed the door behind me. Boston in late October was colder than Portland, with narrow streets, red brick buildings, and wind that cut through my coat near the harbor. I loved it almost immediately. My apartment was small, but every object inside it belonged to me. I chose where the furniture went. I bought yellow curtains without sending anyone a photograph first. I ordered this sofa I liked without asking whether it looked too bright. The silence there felt different. It did not feel like punishment. It felt like space. Mason called 13 times on the day I left. I watched his name appear on my screen while I unpacked plates, then books, then the blue mug. I did not answer. His first messages were confused. Where are you? Why are your things gone? Call me. Later, they became angry. You cannot disappear without a conversation. This is childish. We need to discuss what you've done. By midnight, the anger was gone. Claire, please answer. I'm worried. I read the final message while sitting on the floor with a carton of noodles balanced on my knee. For years, I had begged him to worry. Now that I no longer needed it, he finally did. Ava's wedding took place 6 weeks later in a restored hotel outside Providence. I attended alone.
I wore the dark green dress I had bought months earlier, the one I once would have photographed from 3 angles and sent to Mason for approval. This time I looked in the mirror and decided for myself that I liked it. During the ceremony, Ava walked down the aisle toward Daniel, and his expression changed the moment he saw her. He did not look burdened, he did not look interrupted. He looked as if the entire room had disappeared and she was the only thing left inside it. I cried before she reached the altar. Not because I missed Mason. I cried for the woman I had been with him, the woman who kept reducing her needs, believing that one day she would finally become easy enough to love. That woman deserved to be mourned. After the reception, I returned to Boston and sat beside my apartment window while the city moved below me. My phone remained silent. Mason had stopped calling 2 weeks earlier. I made tea, washed off my makeup, and went to bed without wondering where anyone else was. 3 days later, I met Adrian Cole.
He was a strategy consultant assigned to review a project at our office. He arrived without an entourage, wearing a navy suit that looked as though he had forgotten he was supposed to be impressed by it. During the meeting, he spoke only when he had something useful to say. More importantly, when someone else spoke, he listened. 40 minutes into the presentation, the healing incision beneath my ribs began to ache. I pressed my palm lightly against my side, assuming no one had noticed. At the break, Adrian placed a bottle of water beside my notebook. "You're favoring your left side," he said. "I'm fine." "I didn't say you weren't." He returned to his seat without asking questions or waiting for an explanation. I stared at the bottle. Then I opened it and took a drink. 3 weeks later, Adrian and I were the last 2 people on our floor. The office was quiet, and the windows reflected empty desks against the dark city. I was trying to fix a forecast that refused to balance. Adrian sat 2 tables away, reading a report. At some point, I went to the kitchen for coffee. Without thinking, I made 2 cups. For years, preparing something for 2 people had been automatic. Even after moving to Boston, my hands remembered habits my mind had abandoned. I stared at the second cup, then placed it beside Adrian's laptop. He looked at it, then at me. "Thank you." That was all. He drank it and returned to his work. We stayed another hour, speaking only when necessary. The silence was comfortable. With Mason, silence had always felt like evidence that I was asking for too much. With Adrian, it felt like permission to exist without performing. He began remembering things I had mentioned only once, that I drank coffee without sugar, skipped lunch near deadlines, and preferred arriving early. Sometimes food appeared on my desk. The first time, I carried it to his office. "You didn't have to do this." "I know. I can take care of myself." "I know that too." "Then why?" "Because being capable doesn't mean you should always have to do everything alone." I had no answer. Mason treated every request as weakness. Adrian offered help without requiring me to become helpless first. A week later, he walked me to the subway after another late evening. By the 4th time, I stopped near the entrance. "You don't live this way." "No." "This adds 15 minutes to your trip." "Probably." "Then why do you keep walking me here?" "Because I enjoy talking to you." There was no game and no attempt to make me earn the answer. "You could have just said that." "I thought walking with you made it obvious." "It didn't." "Then I'm saying it now." The train arrived before I could reply. That night, I thought about how strange kindness felt when it did not come with a debt attached. In February, Mason called. His name appeared on my phone while I was leaving the office. For several seconds, I watched it ring. Then I answered. "I'm in Boston for a medical conference," he said. I waited. "Could we meet for coffee?" The old version of me would have heard possibility in his voice. The person I had become heard only a question. All right. We met the next afternoon at a cafe near his hotel. Mason stood when I arrived and stared. My hair was shorter. I wore a rust-colored coat I had chosen because I loved it. "You look different." "I am." He sat slowly. I wanted to apologize. "Okay." His expression tightened, as though he expected me to make the moment easier for him. "I've been thinking about what I said before you left, about you depending on me too much." He looked down.
I spent years asking you to stop needing me. Then you did, and I realized I didn't know who I was to you anymore. That was the result you asked for. I didn't understand what it would cost. No, I said quietly. You only noticed the cost when you had to pay it.
Mason stared into his coffee. I deserved that. This isn't about what you deserve. Then what is it about? It's about the fact that you meant every word you said to me. He looked up. You really believed I was too dependent, too emotional, too demanding. You didn't pretend to be tired or distant. You genuinely thought loving me was an obligation. That isn't true. It was true whenever I needed you. He leaned forward. Why didn't you fight harder for us? For a moment, I saw the man I had loved for 4 years, the man whose approval once determined whether I felt confident, attractive, or safe. I fought for us until I forgot I was supposed to fight for myself. He went quiet. Around us, cups touched saucers and the espresso machine hissed. The world continued as though our relationship were not ending for the second and final time. What about Nora? I asked. Mason's jaw shifted. I ended it. Ended what? The mentorship, the late night calls. All of it. I waited. She didn't take it well, he admitted. When I began setting boundaries, she accused me of abandoning her. Then I realized every crisis happened whenever my attention was somewhere else. That sounds familiar. You were right about her. I don't need to be right anymore. His face tightened. I couldn't see it while you were there. That's the problem with someone you stop appreciating. Their absence becomes clearer than their presence ever was. He looked down at his hands. Is there someone else? I thought of Adrian walking 15 minutes in the wrong direction because he enjoyed talking to me, of the lunches that appeared on my desk without making me feel indebted, of quiet meetings where I did not need to become smaller. That isn't the right question. What is? Whether I'm happy. He looked at me carefully. Are you? Yes. The answer came easily. Mason nodded, but his expression folded inward. I miss you. I know. Do you miss me? I considered lying to be kind. No. The word hurt him. I saw it. But honesty was not cruelty simply because it arrived too late to comfort him. Outside the cafe, the wind cut between the buildings. Mason followed me onto the sidewalk. I wish I had understood sooner. So do I. Could things ever be different? They already are. He looked at me as though he wanted one final sentence that might leave a door open. There was none. The regret you feel can still become something useful, I said. Let it change how you treat the next person. Then I turned toward the subway. I did not look back. Not to punish him. There was simply nothing behind me that I still needed to see. That evening, Adrian and I met for dinner. We had fallen into a Thursday routine without discussing it. Whenever our projects overlapped and neither of us had other plans, we ate at a small restaurant near the river. He was already there when I arrived. He stood and pulled out the chair across from him. Long gay? Complicated. I removed my coat. Mason came to Boston. Adrian's expression did not change, but he set down the menu. How did it go? It ended properly this time. Are you okay?
I checked the answer before speaking. Yes, I actually am. A slow smile reached his eyes. Good. He picked up the menu again.
The salmon is excellent tonight.
I trust your recommendation.
I know.
Halfway through dinner, I noticed how easy it felt to sit across from him. There was room for conversation and silence. No competition for attention. No fear that needing something would make me inconvenient. Looking at Adrian, I finally understood what had been missing. Being chosen should not feel like someone is making a sacrifice. And for the first time in years, I was not waiting for the person beside me to decide I was too much.
Mason returned to Portland the following morning. 3 weeks later, he sent one final message. I hope you're happy, Claire. You deserve to be. I read it while drinking coffee beside my apartment window. For a long time, I had believed happiness was something another person granted me when I behaved correctly. If I asked for less, complained less, needed less, perhaps Mason would finally decide I was easy enough to keep. Now I understood that happiness had never required his permission. Yes, I thought, I do deserve it. I did not reply, not because I wanted to punish him, but because some conversations end when there is nothing left to explain. Spring arrived slowly in Boston. Adrian and I continued having Thursday dinners.
Then Thursday dinners became Saturday walks, spontaneous lunches, and evenings spent cooking in my small kitchen. Nothing happened dramatically. There were no grand declarations or impossible promises. He simply kept showing up. If I had a difficult day, he listened without immediately trying to correct me. If I needed space, he gave it without disappearing. If he offered help and I refused, he did not act offended. He never treated my independence as proof that I should need nothing. One Sunday in May, we walked home from a farmer's market carrying flowers, bread, and more fruit than either of us could possibly eat. Adrian held the heavier bag. He had taken it from me several blocks earlier without comment. "You know," I said, "I still think about something you told me." He glanced toward me. "That could be dangerous. You said being capable doesn't mean someone should always have to handle everything alone." I remember. I spent 4 years believing that needing anything made me difficult. The humor disappeared from his expression. I thought if I became quieter and easier, Mason would finally choose me without hesitation. Adrian slowed his pace. And did becoming quieter help? No, it only made it easier for him not to notice me. We stopped near the entrance of my building. The afternoon sunlight reflected from the windows, and people passed us carrying groceries and walking dogs. "Then you gave me a bottle of water," I continued. "You knew I could get one myself, you just wanted me to have it." That wasn't exactly a heroic gesture. It didn't need to be. He looked at me with the steady attention I had once found almost uncomfortable. "I'm still learning not to question kindness," I admitted. "You don't owe me trust before you're ready." "I know. And you don't owe me dependence either." "I know that too." Adrian shifted the market bag into one hand. "Claire, I'm not here because you need someone to rescue you." "I know. I'm here because I choose you, not because you asked perfectly or proved something or made yourself convenient." He paused. "Because I want to be." The strange thing was that I believed him. There was no part of me searching his face for irritation or waiting for him to change his mind. "I know," I said softly. "That's what feels different. I actually know." He held out his free hand. I took it. Mason had taught me that love was something I could lose by needing too much. Boston taught me that I could survive without begging to be chosen. Adrian taught me that real care does not make you feel ashamed for accepting it. By the time Mason realized I had stopped asking for his attention, I had already stopped waiting for it. And the life I built after him was not revenge. It was proof that leaving had been the kindest thing I had ever done for myself. Do you think Mason deserved to lose Claire, or should she have confronted him before leaving? Share your opinion in the comments, and if you enjoyed this story, like the video and subscribe for more emotional drama, betrayal, and revenge stories.